Are you looking for a way to advertise your business, offer discounts to your customers, and help veterans at the same time? Then citybyhero.com is the answer. It's your shop local program helping you while providing jobs and funds for veterans. It's simple to sign up, easy for your clients to find your business and your offers, and there are many plans to choose from that fit your budget and your needs. Go to citybyhero.com and sign up today, and we'll make a donation for you to a veterans organization. citybyhero.com.
And now, it's time to Stand for Truth with the host of Stand for Truth Radio, Susan Knowles.
And welcome to the program, everyone. I am your host, Susan Knowles. I'm so glad that you joined us today. Please check out my website at susanknowles.com. And don't forget to follow Stand for Truth Radio with a variety of shows that I do, such as Knowles on the News and God's Views on Political News with my co-host, Bill Closer. To hear all the podcasts, just go to Spreaker.com or download the Spreaker phone app and type in Susan Knowles. And all the shows can also be heard on iHeartRadio. Easiest way to find the shows are just to go to SusanKnowles.com and click on the big iHeartRadio logo. It will take you right there. Follow me also on Twitter at Susan Knowles and YouTube on my Susan Knowles channel. Now, my guest today is Philip Haney. Philip Haney studied Arabic culture and language while working as a scientist in the Middle East before he was hired as a founding member of the Department of Homeland Security in 2003, becoming an Armed Customs and Border Protection officer. He served several tours of duty at the National Targeting Center near Washington, D.C., where he quickly was promoted to its advanced targeting team, an unprecedented accomplishment for an agent on temporary duty assignment. Officer Haney won numerous awards and commendations from his superiors for meticulously compiling information and producing actionable reports that led to the identification of hundreds of terrorists. He has specialized in Islamic theology and the strategy and tactics of the global Islamic movement. He retired honorably in July 2015. He's also the author of See Something, Say Nothing, a Homeland Security officer exposes the government's submission to Jihad. So let's welcome to the show Philip Haney. How are you, Philip?
Very well, thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're here. Before we get started, why don't you tell everybody where you're coming to us from today?
I'm overlooking the city of Jerusalem.
Wow.
And that's right.
It must be a very gorgeous sight.
Well, it's quite beautiful. I've been here many times, and I love coming to Jerusalem. And you can really tell how much the country is growing. It's really blooming.
Wow, very nice. Well, we had you on the show about a year ago. And for those who may have forgotten about the show or maybe didn't hear the show, tell us how you became a DHS agent. How did that all come about?
Well, I was working with the federal government in the Department of Agriculture. And then 9/11 happened, and I volunteered to become part of the new Department of Homeland Security. At the time, it was just simply called the Office of Homeland Security. And Max Cleland, Democratic senator from Georgia, wrote a letter to the first director of DHS, Tom Ridge. And long story short, I became part of the new Department of Homeland Security as an agriculture officer, but I immediately began doing intelligence analysis and sending them up the chain of command. And that led me to be reassigned into the intelligence unit. And that's how I began working on counterterrorism directly.
Well, and for those people who may not have heard about your book, See Something, Say Nothing, which is just the opposite of what we always used to hear, but under Obama it was more or less see something, say nothing. Can you tell us a little bit about what that book was about?
Well, I found out that if you actually, as time went on in the administration, saw something and actually said something, that it was anything but well received within the administration, particularly in my case, because I happened to have chosen or they chose me. The process unfolded that I ended up working on the two particular Muslim groups that President Obama was really working with. One was the Muslim Brotherhood, and the other one was Tablighi Jamaat. And Tablighi Jamaat is a group from central India that are very similar to the Wahhabi Muslims of Saudi Arabia. And I worked on both groups during my career and tied hundreds, literally, of individuals and organizations to terrorism. And since the Obama administration was working with these groups, in particular the Muslim Brotherhood, obviously something has to give. And I guess they assumed it would be me, and they tried to ruin my career by investigating me 9 times over a 10-year period.
Wow. And what are some of the things that they investigated you for? What were some of the allegations?
Well, it was never for failure to obey an order or for some moral failure. It was because I was putting information into the system that was literally highlighting or focusing on specific individuals related either to the Muslim Brotherhood front groups operating in the United States, like CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations, Islamic Society of North America, also known as ISNA, North American Islamic Trust, the Muslim Public Affairs Council, the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America, and or Tablighi Jamaat on the other side of the coin. And the State Department and the Civil Rights and Civil Liberties branch of the Department of Homeland Security was actually working with individuals in these organizations directly. And so they began purging the information out of the system. And that's basically when I became a whistleblower. I started going to Congress in 2009 when the Obama administration began altering, modifying, and deleting information out of our law enforcement database.
And how come we've never looked into that? I mean, I know under Obama, of course, he's not going to look into it. He's not going to say, let's spearhead that and find out what's going on. But is it something that you think the Trump administration should look at or will look at possibly? Or is it just a dead issue?
I certainly hope so. That would be my definition of draining the swamp, my portion of the swamp. As I say, I would like to tell President Trump, if you would like to drain the swamp, President Trump, I know where the valves are. I know where the ones that are open that should be closed, and I know where ones that are closed that should be open. And I could literally help him, and we could restore the information and begin tracking these organizations and individuals like we did in the first 2 or 3 years after the Department of Homeland Security was organized in March of 2003. The first 2 or 3 years, we actually were able to do our job. But as the administration changed and time went on, as you hear so much in the news lately, purging of information, preventing law enforcement from doing their jobs, rules of engagement with the military, they're all really descriptive phrases for the same overall ideology of the Obama administration. And I was just one of many people who ran headlong into those policies because I took an oath to protect our country from threat, both foreign and domestic, and I would not back down. And that's basically what I talk about in the book. See something, say nothing.
And has this lack of information now that we have, or the information that's been, quote unquote, destroyed, is that information in any way helping people to come into this country without being vetted or, any other way, do you think?
Yes, there are lots of holes in our immigration system. We focus a lot on the southern border,
yes,
a.k.a. the wall. We've also been hearing an awful lot since President Trump was elected about the executive orders that were issued in order to look at first the 7 and then the 6 countries that are specifically named.
Right.
But there's also illegal immigration. There is also visa fraud. There is also the misuse of what we call the visa waiver program. There are about 15 or 20 European countries with high populations of Muslims that don't even require a visa at all. And then there is fraudulent visa and fraudulent passport black marketing as well, in particular from the very same 6 or 7 countries that we've been hearing about so much. Because the only one of the 6 that is named now, meaning Iran, that has a functioning government, the rest of them are in total chaos. And there's no way that they can produce reliable documentation of who individuals are. So there's 4 or 5 different main holes in the system, and deleting information out of the system is obvious going to create more problems than we already have.
Do you think that was some of the things that were connected with the H-1B visa program, and we're getting people in that way as well that shouldn't have been allowed in, do you think?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. That's just one more of the several, up to many different holes there are in the system. You just basically think of it as, a fish net with real large netting. It allows a lot of fish to get through. And what we need to do is create a net with much smaller little squares so we can catch more fish, meaning the bad ones that are trying to get into the country. And it's not a lack of law, nor is it a lack of ability within law enforcement. It's a lack of permission, if you will, from the leadership in Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, the FBI, etc., that makes it impossible for officers to do their jobs.
And do you think there's been improvement now under the Trump administration, as far as you can tell, in those areas?
Yes. I'd like to point out in particular 2 directives that were signed on the same day, which was February 20th, 2017. They are directives signed by new Secretary of Department of Homeland Security, Ray Kelly. And one of them is enforcement of immigration law, and the other one is restoration of immigration law. And those 2 memos are going to have really dramatic changes in the way that ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Border Patrol, the ones that are literally on the border, and Customs and Border Protection, which was my former agency. He specifically gave back authority to those 3 agencies to start doing our jobs again. The mainstream media hasn't covered that at all. And yet those 2 directives from February 20th of 2017 are going to have profound influence on our ability to do our job. I say we, even though I'm retired, but I'm still involved in this issue.
And is that, for example, we hear a lot about coming out of California with the sanctuary cities and trying, it seems, to protect criminal illegal immigrants. Is that sort of connected to the same thing that you're talking about and taking the funding away? Or are you talking about other things that are going to come out of those 2 initiatives, or directives?
No, it's exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Ray Kelly just gave a speech, 2 days ago on the southern border?
Yes.
Specifically saying that we are going to focus on enforcing the law, deporting people that are here illegally, and specifically discuss sanctuary cities. What I find most incredible is Janet Napolitano. She is a former Secretary of Homeland Security who is now the Chancellor of the University of California.
Right.
She specifically told her law enforcement personnel that work at the different campuses around the state not to cooperate with federal law enforcement officials. Well, that's exactly what she told us when she was Secretary of Homeland Security, but just in a different arena. She told Customs and Border Protection, ICE, Border Patrol, and so on, not to do their job. And if I needed proof of what she really did, all I have to do is point to her decision to make the University of California a sanctuary campus, the entire thing. while telling law enforcement officers that work in that environment to deliberately not cooperate with federal law enforcement. She's forcing them to do what she forced us to do, essentially violate our vow, except that I didn't violate my vow because I found a way to go to Congress, and that was my chain of command, and that's what helped me survive it. By going to Congress 55 times over a 4+ year time, I was able to give them information and survived being investigated 9 times because I had a way, to survive it, to give information to Congress. Otherwise, I have no idea what I would have actually done if I didn't have that option to follow the chain of command right into the Congress. And not everybody has that option.
Right. Well, and it's amazing, too, along the same lines of what you're talking about. I don't know if you're familiar with the state Senate leader in California, Kevin De Leon, but he is one of the most outspoken people against President Trump and his sanctuary city policy and U.S. Attorney General's Jeff Sessions. And he recently came out and basically said that the policies that Trump is trying to do now with having the police communicate with ICE, that those principles are nothing more than white supremacy. And De Leon, I just have to tell you this because I want the listeners to hear it, but I want you to hear this too, to see how egregious this problem is. Recently, De Leon was on a radio talk show, and here's a statement that he made. This is verbatim. Half of my family would be eligible for deportation under the executive order because they got a false Social Security card, they got a false identification, they got a false driver's license prior to us passing AB 60, they got a false green card, and anyone who has family members who are undocumented knows that almost entirely everybody has secured some sort of false identification. That's what you need to survive to work. They are eligible for massive deportation. And he hired Eric Holder's law firm. He's on a retainer in California, from what I understand, to go after Donald Trump's policies tooth and nail. So, I mean, this is what Trump is up against.
That's another astonishing part of the story, is that Department of Justice under Eric Holder set up a grand jury to investigate me to find probable cause and charge me criminally with violating the privacy rights of foreign nationals. They were going to put me in jail for simply upholding immigration law and upholding my vow to help protect our country from threat. They were going to actually make a case study, and they convened the grand jury to find criminal charges to put me in jail for doing exactly what the Department of Homeland Security was created to do. So there's Eric Holder out in California, and there is Janet Napolitano out in California. And now, I don't mean to be sarcastic, but California is getting a taste of what it was like. Can you imagine working for those two people as an active duty law enforcement officer when no one was restraining them? And speaking about restraint, Attorney General Sessions could solve this problem quite easily. Simply serve an injunction against Janet Napolitano and any other law enforcement officer or attorney general type person out in California and tell them, you will either obey the law or you will suffer this, and this consequence. He has the power to do it. And that would be an example that would send shockwaves across the entire country. If you serve an injunction against Janet Napolitano, it would be incredibly ironic since she was the former Secretary of Homeland Security, but it certainly would send a signal to the rest of the country that the Trump administration is serious about enforcing immigration law.
Yeah, I've noticed with Jeff Sessions, it seems like in the beginning he tries to be very nice. We would like for you to do this. It's kind of, just almost asking you rather than telling you need to obey the law. And I think what I've seen with him so far is that he gets a little bit more progressively harder on you will obey the law. So I'm thinking somewhere down the road that his attitude will change to, will you please do this, to you will do this. And I'm one, I don't like a lot of government interference. I especially don't like the feds interfering with the states. But in California's case, when they're absolutely going against federal law, like what this appears to be with the state leader in California, something is going to have to be done, because California, $20 million or more are going to be lost in federal funds here, because they're going to try to make this a sanctuary state. And the Republicans, they try to stop it. But every time, of course, when you have a Democratic run Senate or House and Senate in California, you can't stop it, because they just deny every bill that you have. So I think we're going to see probably places like California, New York, they're going to have to be made examples of. And I don't know about these state leaders, if there's any way to, I don't know, bring charges against a state leader who will not obey federal law, but it's going to happen. I think it really will.
Well, there's three things that come to mind as you're talking about this. And the first is that Attorney General Sessions is basically giving these states and cities and law enforcement officials across the country an opportunity to step up and do what's right.
Exactly.
Kind of like a parent does to a child. Okay, you can only eat one cookie or two, and you find out that the child is eating 5. And eventually you take steps, just like with children, to make them realize that you're really serious about what you're talking about. The other thing is that California, for example, is going to have to sit down and balance the equation between what they might lose in federal funding and what they're supposedly gaining from the illegal immigrants that are working in their economy. Excuse me, I might have to cough.
That's okay.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
The third thing is we need to go back to Article 6 of the Constitution, which basically says that the U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land,
right,
and that the judges in every state are bound to obey it. That is a very fundamental clause that has been denied or misused or ignored for so long that simply enforcing the law or talking about enforcing the law, like with the Attorney General out in California, is now seen as radical. That's how far from the center we've gotten, where we have high-level law enforcement and government officials blatantly making excuses for not enforcing the law. Well, if we don't correct this, then it's inevitable we're going to have all kinds of additional, more severe terrorist attacks and budgetary and financial and social problems, crime, etc., from illegal aliens or illegal immigrants who are not addressed. Either legalize them and find a way to provide them status or deport them, depending on the circumstances of each case. I don't think Attorney General Sessions is trying to just, like a giant, just wipe away all these people. I believe that he's fair about it, but he's also giving us the signal that if you don't voluntarily begin complying with the law, that they will take more severe steps. I think that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah. And I think, with California, you would think that, some other states that were looking to become sanctuary cities or sanctuary states, they've started looking at things and they've gotten reasonable. They've said, we can't afford to lose $20 million. But California, they really start to, I think, dig their heels in, and that's what we're seeing. And they're okay. I really think that California would be okay with losing that amount of money, because they can say, well, we'll just turn around and get it right from the taxpayers. Because we have a lot of illegal immigrants in this country, in California, precisely. And we go ahead and we continue to give and give and give, and the taxpayers in California are sitting here going, when does it stop? We can't afford this. And California doesn't care. They keep going. And we even give illegal immigrants driver's license now, and we give them, we sign them up to vote, although they say, well, they're not going to vote, but we sign them up to vote anyway. And so I could see California fighting this until the very end, until, Sessions just says enough is enough and we're not going to do this anymore.
Well, that's what he will do. That's actually what the oath of office that he took.
Nice.
I'm also a native Californian, and I was born in 1953, and I've seen the whole development of what the state was like when we were little kids versus what it has become now under the predominantly Democratic leadership in the state capital in Sacramento.
Right.
And they can make all the declarations they want, but there's a point when economics overtakes ideology. And it's an inevitability, like a mathematical formula. You can only tax people so much. You have to remember that America was based on a declaration of independence that derived primarily from taxation without representation. It was a tax revolt that precipitated the Revolutionary War by being taxed so heavily for every little thing that finally the colonials said that's enough.
Yeah.
And they revolted. And you tax people enough and you're going to push businesses right out of the state of California. They'll go next door wherever, Oregon, Nevada, some other state, and the economy of California will drop like a lead weight. So that's an inevitable mathematical formula that there's always tension between ideology and economics. That's why socialism never works, because it cannot find a happy medium with economics. And that's the way California is going. They have so many socialist ideas that they force other people to pay for. But eventually, that well's going to run dry. And then they're going to be faced with a really severe crisis.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to do business in California now, and a lot of companies are leaving. We just had a 12-cent per gallon tax increase. We've increased the DMV. They're doing everything that they can do, just like good liberal Democrats do, and trying to raise all this money and put it to social welfare services. And the state is just not going to be able to handle it, like you said. Eventually, it's just going to crumble. And I think it really is going to take Sessions stepping in and saying, okay, you didn't want to do it the easy way, we'll have to do it the hard way, and that's it. And I think some of these, I don't know what the laws are as far as these leaders that are doing this sanctuary city, like the mayors, but we need to look into it and see if there are charges that can be brought against these people, because it's not about recalling everybody. We don't have the funds and the time to go recall everyone that's doing this type of thing if you're opposed to it. But it seems to me like if you're breaking the law as a representative in government, there seems to be some type of repercussions, that need to be brought against you, some type of consequences. And I hopefully if that exists, they will start doing that as well.
Well, for example, I know California loves petitions.
Yes.
You could initiate a petition to send to Attorney General Sessions, asking him simply to enforce the law at the federal level and refer back to Article 6 of the Constitution. The judges in California and in every other state are obligated, according to the Constitution, to recognize and follow the law. Now, there are rights that belong to the states,
right? But
ones that have consequences, both good or bad, related to the entire rest of the country, they're obligated to obey those laws. And so it's a big test.
It is.
California has always been progressive, and up until more recently, it's usually been in a pretty good way. But more recently, the ideology of the left, progressive leftists in dominating the political process in California are taking the state more closer and closer to a very dangerous fall that will be hard to recover from if they're not careful.
No, I absolutely agree with that. One thing you mentioned before in your book, you said that the Obama administration had always had a hard time naming our enemies, and that you said we've always had a hard time doing that, even under Bush. What about now under the Trump administration?
Well, it's early, and a lot of us in the counter-Jihad movement who have paid a really big price by standing up for the defense of America through a long process of Obama policies are hoping that after we get past, the initial chaos of the transition, that President Trump will begin to more clearly recognize the true nature of the threat. That's what we hope for. And for myself, I'm still involved. I'm waiting to be redeputized, that's what I call it,
Right.
to have an opportunity to go back into federal service and help President Trump specifically address those valves that I talked to you about before, the ones that are open that should be closed, those are called leaks, and the ones that are closed that should be open, those are ones that actually drain the swamp. I'd like to see somewhere a whistleblower protection group made up of specialists that could actually make themselves known and encourage people from the different branches of the government to literally come in and lay the information on the table about what's going on in their particular arena. Department of Defense, FBI, CIA, DHS, all the agencies that are involved in some way or another with national security. And if there are things that are going on that shouldn't be, then to create a safe pathway for these individuals to come in and literally lay the information on the table and then evaluate it from there and to go forward. That's what I hope we get to. Right now, people know things, but they still aren't confident enough to come forward. But I'm very hopeful. We've just started. And in all honesty, and I don't expect him to do this, but if President Trump rhetorically did nothing, we would still be better off than what the policies that were implemented under the Obama administration would have been if Hillary Clinton had come into office. I don't think I could possibly exaggerate what it would be like if Hillary Clinton had been elected, because all these issues that we see that we're struggling to address, there would have been no option for that. You talk about executive orders and unilateral decisions that would have been made. Oh, you just can't imagine, because the whole structure was already in place. And we're just getting little indicators like the electronic surveillance of President Trump during his election campaign. They denied it, they denied it, they denied it. And then all of a sudden we found out, son of a gun, they really were doing it. And the way they changed the narrative on these big issues is just exactly the way she changed the narrative on the Benghazi operation, or the Fast and Furious, or the IRS scandal. And now we're starting to see information emerging in those cases that's proving how lawless they really were. And I expect more to come out. My own story in See Something, Say Nothing, I have now more FOIA information on my case. I'll call it the case, or my story, regarding in particular the San Bernardino shootings and the case that I worked on at the National Targeting Center that we call the Tablighi Jamaat Initiative. Not to mention the stuff that's coming out about the Muslim Brotherhood and their involvement in the federal government. So those two arenas, there's a whole lot more that should come out in the weeks, days, months, and years ahead. And I hope to be a part of that.
Yeah, I hope you are too, because I think that the American public deserves to know what has happened, and they deserve to know the truth. And when you're talking about whistleblowers, I don't know if you've heard of this individual, but and I can't get any information on it so much. Larry Klayman, who is the Freedom Watch, I believe he's the head of Freedom Watch. There was an article, and I think a letter even sent to Nunez, the House of the House Intelligence Committee, and they were talking about a man named Dennis Montgomery. They say is a whistleblower, and supposedly, according to what I read in the letter, and if it's at all true, he had 600 million letters or pieces of information and about 47 servers with information on it that showed that common citizens, in the United States, everyday people, were surveilled along with other people like Justice Roberts and the Trump administration. And yet, I haven't heard a single thing about that. And supposedly as well, Dennis Montgomery spoke to James Comey's office, and they have this information. So I don't know if the public will ever hear anything about that, or if that's part of the swamp that we're going to hear being drained later on.
Well, let me agree with you. Basically, what you're saying is that there's a lot of information that's already available.
Right.
Even what we know already, if we simply laid it on the table and laid it out in an organized fashion, would be an indictment level for former Obama officials.
Right.
But let me give you an example of the San Bernardino, which of course is in your home state there.
Yes.
The person that supplied the guns to Tashfeen Malik and Syed Farouk is named Enrique Marquez. He's in jail now, and he should be. But the reason why he's in jail is for multiple failed plots with Syed Farouk.
Oh, my gosh.
What does that mean? Multiple failed plots with Syed Farouk. It means the FBI already knew who Syed Farouk was.
Right.
Before the San Bernardino shootings ever happened. Now, asking it in a rhetorical way, do you believe that even the families of the people in San Bernardino realize that the FBI already knew about Syed Farouk before he came to that Civic Center meeting and killed all those people? They probably haven't even realized it or put it together. But it's a fact. Enrique Marquez is in jail because of it now, not to mention the other charges. So, my premise that I've talked about in public is that I worked on a case at the National Targeting Center called the Tablighi Jamaat Initiative. Has to do with the kind of mosques in America that Syed Farouk attended in San Bernardino. Darul al-Islamiyah, San Bernardino. I put together a whole network of individuals and organizations related to the same mosque, the one in San Bernardino, that the U.S. government deleted entirely out of the system.
Wow.
So, you have DHS, Customs and Border Protection officials at the highest level deleting information out of the database of this network, while simultaneously going on parallel, the FBI is investigating them. And neither agency is talking one to the other.
Right.
So one agency deletes the information, and the other agency fails to act on what should have been observable, more than observable. They charged him with multiple failed plots. What I'm trying to say is that there were opportunities to prevent the San Bernardino attacks. Not just one, not just my premise, that we would have either put Syed Farouk on the no-fly list and he would have never gone to Saudi Arabia, or we would have prevented Tashfeen Malik from ever getting a U.S. visa to come here in the first place. And now we've come all the way back to the beginning of the conversation. Tashmin Malik should have never been given a visa.
Unbelievable. And
Yes, it
see,
is.
yeah, and the families, I mean, they deserve to know this information. They deserve to know who's responsible for all this. You know, they need to find that out. And that information does need to come out. We talk about our government, and, there's so much going on. How do we get people to do their jobs and to do this well? My concern right now in a lot of the Trump administration is that we have leftovers from the Obama administration. People that, quite frankly, I don't know them, but I don't trust them because of things just right now that you're saying and other things that have come out or that we're not hearing about. And so how do we get this done when we don't have people that seemingly we can rely upon?
As I've been traveling around the country the last year plus, that's probably one of the most common questions that I've been asked. Mm-hmm. And I always tell people that this is a government of, for, and by the people. It
Right.
still is. The election proved that. And even at its very best, even if the federal and, if you want to say, the state governments are operating at their optimal best, these issues and these challenges that we face at the grassroots level still will have to be fought by people who live in little towns and the grassroots level all the way across the country. It takes both the grassroots level working in cooperation with the state and federal government for this system that we have called a democratic republic, a constitutional republic, to actually work. So I always encourage people, start with where you are. Become informed. There are three major arenas that we can work in. One is the social arena. And the flashpoint for the social arena is what we've already been seeing. It's immigration reform. There's also the political arena. And that has to do with the sovereignty of our own country. For example, whether or not we can have a embassy in Jerusalem. The whole world tells us, no, you can't do that because we don't like you recognizing the fact that Jerusalem is considered the capital of the Jewish state. See, that we have the right to establish diplomatic relationships with any country and any leadership that we choose to. And the third arena is law enforcement. And that's going to be in where we designate groups like the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization and start actually doing the law enforcement work that needs to be done to protect the country from threat. So you have the social arena, the political arena, and the law enforcement arena. And pretty much everybody that's listening can find a place in one of those three arenas to start working. Because don't forget again, it is a government of, for, and by the people. And no matter how well the federal government may be functioning, you're still going to have to address these challenges at the city, the local level in order for things to work the way they should. So there's plenty for everybody to do. And start spending some time becoming familiar with the current events that are going on around you and get involved. Because even if you write letters and you never get a response, the point is not to write the letter simply to get the response. The point is to write the letter and put it into the public record so that they can never say they didn't know. Because
Right.
eventually, sooner or later, like I talked about before with the mathematical equation, there's going to come a point when something will have to give.
Yeah, and I think, again, we're talking about judges and obeying the law and all this. I mean, we have a lot of people when President Trump is trying to do things and move this country forward, enforce the immigration laws and make sure that we're doing that. Then we have judges like the ones in Hawaii who are trying to prevent the immigration laws from remaining effective. I mean, nobody complained at all when Obama had the 7 countries on his list. Nobody said a word. And now we even take one country away, and we still can't protect this country. And so, I mean, there are it seems like a lot of forces, that are still present that are working against this administration. And I think it's going to be an uphill battle unless the administration just starts to become tougher on enforcing the laws, period.
Well, the reason why, according to the Declaration of Independence, that the Creator instituted government among men was to protect the unalienable rights that he gave us: life,
right,
liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Governments are there to protect those. But if the government is not protecting them, then we also have options that are discussed in the Declaration of Independence, meaning to become actively involved in the process and address things at the level that you live, wherever you are, with whatever degree of authority that you might have, and then form coalitions and groups. Is it going to be easy? Nope. But what is the consequence if we do nothing? Actually, we only have two choices, and standing still is not one of them. At this point in our history, our country's history, we either have the choice of going forward, no matter how difficult it might be, or to be pushed backwards. And in places like California, there have been a lot of pushing backwards. It's time for people to reverse that course and start going forward. Otherwise, 5-10 years from now, you're going to look back and people are going to ask, what the heck were you doing back then?
Yeah, that's true. And California, of course, they still think they can do CalExit, so, and I think that's what they're going to see as their way of handling the problem of the federal government. Well, we'll just leave. But, again, we know that is a very difficult thing for them to try to attempt, and you have to have, I believe, the permission of the federal government to do so. I mean, people think it's a simple process, and it's not. And California proves time and time again that without that federal dollar, they can't function properly. So
they tried that before. It's called the war between the states.
Yes.
The southern states seceded from the Union.
Right.
In order to preserve their quote-unquote states' rights to maintain slavery. That's what the Civil War was about. Right. Yes, it included the emancipation of the slaves, but it was actually about states' rights, whether the states could choose to have slavery or not. And California, if it tries to break away from the Union, it'd probably sink faster than what a earthquake would do, because they're not as autonomous as they like to think.
No, I mean, it was pretty amazing with the Oroville Dam that should have been repaired, and money was not going to repair that dam, and it's silent. Now it's silent. No one's really talking about it anymore. But immediately when it was apparent that the dam might break or we were going to be some serious problems, and this is after California had talked about seceding, what did they do? The first thing they did was call up President Trump. Hey, we need money. We need federal dollars to help with the dam and when the damage that's being caused. So that's their first impulse, is to go and get money from somebody else. So California leadership is fooling themselves if they think they can pull that off.
That's right. There are some things that are just too big for the state, even one like California, to handle on their own.
Yes.
And so
we'll see what happens. But, I wanted to ask you, since you've written your book, has there been a lot of interest? Has it gone up? Has it gone down? What's going on with that?
The interest in the book has gone way up. Since the Trump administration, since President Trump was elected, in all honesty, people were very nervous about the entire subject that the book covers. And they weren't really sure who was going to win the presidency. But now that President Trump is in office, they're not as nervous about looking into things as they were before. And interest has gone up 2 to 3 times, and I'm saying that based on the number of people who come to the events where I speak, just on that alone.
Wow.
And the book sales are also remain really strong. It trends up and down, but it's considered a bestseller in 3 categories on Amazon. So it's
Wow.
been maintaining a real strong interest. And what's really remarkable about the book is that it's a live story. It's not just something that happened months or years ago. There are things that come out in the headlines practically every week, sometimes more frequently, that are directly related to the things that I talk about in the book. So nothing has been resolved yet, not a single major case that I talk about in the book. The Muslim Brotherhood, the Tablighi Jamaat, the immigration problem, has been actually fully addressed yet. And so if you read it now, it seems even more incredible or insightful simply because everything that I write about in the book is coming true on what I call the big screen, on the national big screen. More and more people are hearing about these things that didn't hear about them before. So that's why I'm still involved in having radio interviews like with you, because it's important. I'm trying to encourage my fellow Americans not to be discouraged, but get involved, because each one of us has a duty as a citizen to help protect our country from threat, both foreign and domestic. You don't just have to be a military officer or a law enforcement officer to take the vow. Everybody can do it in their own way.
No, I absolutely agree with you, and that's why I do programs like this to get people involved, where we don't just sit back and wait for somebody else to do it. We first have to talk about it to know that there is something that we need to take action on. I think for the past 8 years we've been told, there's no problem. There's no problem with ISIS and ISIL, as it was called for 8 years. There's no problem with anything. Everything's fine. And we know, if anybody has just been watching TV at all or been awake at all for 5 minutes, there are a lot of problems that we didn't know were going on, that we were told everything was okay. And I know now that recently the head of the Department of Homeland Security has said that they're investigating open terrorist investigations. They're going on in 50 states. I mean, that should tell people that there's a problem that we weren't told about, and there are things that we need to work on. Is that
that's not something that just developed in the last 100 days?
Right. Exactly.
It's actually been the fact for quite some time. And those of us in the active duty and in intelligence and law enforcement have known this for years, that the problem is much broader, deeper, and wider than was being admitted to within the Obama administration. And that was what was so doubly infuriating about the policies that the Obama administration implemented, is those of us who were there at the ground level could see it every single day. And essentially we're shouting at the top of our voices that these people are not our friends. We shouldn't be letting them into the country. And we need to be tracking them once they do arrive, etc., etc. And we're constantly told, not if you see something, say something, but just the opposite. If you see something, say nothing. And if you don't shut up, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I think that really needs to be investigated, and some people need to be, maybe a grand jury needs to be convened or whatever, because when you're deliberately trying to allow things to happen, and I say deliberately because you know the risks and you're still doing it, there's an issue, and it needs to be looked at.
Ignorance is a bit like a paper cup full of water. Everybody knows if you fill up a paper cup with water, then in a day or so, or more or less, that paper cup is going to soften and all the water is going to run out.
Yes.
There comes a point when you can't just keep saying you didn't know, because especially elected officials, they don't have the option. If they're awake and they're doing the job that they were elected to do, even in a minimal level, they're going to be confronted with these issues real soon, because virtually every district across the country has some sort of problem with immigration. and every district across the country has been touched in some way with terrorism. So those are the priorities that elected President Trump. Those are the things that are on people's mind. I'm here in Israel right now. The government has never told the Israeli people that they should just get used to terrorism. No, everybody here in the country is involved, from their home to their community to, right on out to the national level. Everybody's plugged in. Everybody has a cell phone. Everybody's on reserve duty. Everybody is watching out, not just for themselves, but for the benefit of their family, friends, and neighbors. And the United States is not immune from the threat of terrorism or poor immigration policies, and we need to address it. Otherwise, it's going to address us, Susan.
Oh, absolutely.
One way or the other.
No, I agree with you. And we have just a couple of minutes left. What would you tell President Trump if you could just tell him one thing?
I can help him drain the swamp.
Well, and Philip, I hope that you get the opportunity to do that. I know from reading your book and having you on, I feel that, and I think people, when they read your book and they hear this show and maybe go back and hear the other show, you come across as a very patriotic man, an honest man, and somebody who really is out there wanting to make a difference. And I think we need more people like you to do that. So I certainly hope you get that opportunity.
Well, that's one of the things that I've had the honor and the privilege of seeing up close and personal as I've traveled around the country. The spark of hope I saw ignite in people's eyes from Vermont to San Diego. And another thing I learned is that American people don't expect perfection.
Right.
What they want is honesty. Their standard for acceptance is not that you're perfect. It's that simply that you're honest. Even when you make a mistake, you just said, "Yup, I did it, and here I learned this from it." And American people are very, very forgiving, but they don't like people who lie and who are dishonest. And I believe that's the reason why Clinton lost.
I believe so. I agree with that totally. Now, your book is called See Something, Say Nothing. A Homeland Security Officer Exposes the Government's Submission to Jihad. I hope everybody goes out and buys that book. It is a great book, and if you didn't hear the show when Philip was on before, it was last May, I believe, that he was on almost a year ago. Great book. You'll get a lot out of the book and of the show as well. You can get the book on Amazon.com and WND.com, I'm guessing.
Yes, that's true. Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. And we hope to see, and hear more from you, and, keep in touch with what you're doing. And, thank you so much for being on the show today. And again, good luck with getting back into the government, and probably we're never really gone, but really getting back into it and starting to make a difference. We need that.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate everyone listening, and God bless America.
God bless America, indeed. And I think we have the right person who is leading this country. And we're just everybody is going to have to, just to make sure and be always on guard. We're not only fighting the people trying to come in and do us harm, but there are people already here that try to do things that circumvent the good things that this president is trying to do. And when we have to we have to get off the couch, and like you said, we have to start doing things, and I think in that way that we can make a difference. So, God bless you, and thank you for being here today, Philip.
You're welcome. It's still true that eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. It's still true.
It is absolutely still true. So you take care, and God bless you, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So that's our guest, Philip Haney, great guy. And again, please go and get his book, See Something, Say Nothing. A Homeland Security Officer Exposes the Government's Submission to Jihad. We finally have a president in office who is trying to do something, but as Philip was saying, we need to do our part as well. This is our opportunity to do it. Get the book, read it. I think you'll find out more about some things in some areas that you could help in. So until next time, thank you so much again. As always, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and we'll see you again next week. God bless you. Take care.